Breaking Bad of breakfast. Stop me if you've heard this one before. A group of criminals plots a high-stakes heist. They need logistics, they need an insider, and they need to bypass state-of-the-art security to steal a commodity worth more per barrel than crude oil. You're thinking diamonds?
3,000
gold?
tons?
Maybe illicit plutonium for a doomsday device. No. We are talking about the soul of Canada. We are talking about the blood of the tree. We are talking about maple syrup. Welcome to the true story of the great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist. A crime so sticky, so polite, and so incredibly lucrative that it makes Ocean's 11 look like a documentary about shoplifting gum. In 2012, one man decided to walk away with $18 million worth of pancake topping. This isn't a cartoon. This is the biggest agricultural theft in history. The OPEC of pancakes. To understand how you steal 3,000 tons of syrup, you first have to understand why it was all in one place. You see, the world economy is weird, but the Canadian syrup economy is basically a dictatorship run by sweet-toothed overlords. It's called the FPAQ, the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers. And I am not joking when I tell you they operate exactly like a cartel. Think of them as the OPEC of breakfast. Quebec produces nearly 80% of the world's supply of maple syrup. That is a global monopoly. And like any good monopoly, they control the price by controlling the supply. If you are a farmer in Quebec, you can't just sell your syrup to whoever you want.
Oh, no!
Oh, no. You have to sell it to the Federation. If you produce too much, you can't sell the extra. The Federation takes it and locks it away in a massive warehouse known as the Global Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve. Yes, that is a real place. The U.S. has a strategic petroleum reserve for wars. Canada has a strategic syrup reserve for waffles. It is the Fort Knox of fructose, located in a nondescript warehouse in St. Louis de Blanford. Inside, stacked to the ceiling, were thousands of white metal barrels, holding millions of pounds of grade A amber liquid gold. And sitting on top of that mountain of sugar was a price tag that made people very, very greedy. Enter Richard Valliere. Richard wasn't a supervillain with a scar and a white cat. He was a barrel roller, a guy well known in the syrup industry. But Richard had a problem. He saw the Federation as a tyrannical regime. He believed in the free market. And by free market, I mean he wanted to sell syrup without the Federation taking a cut. Here's the financial reality. At the time, a barrel of crude oil was trading around $90. A barrel of maple syrup, that was worth nearly $1,300 or so. Do the math. Syrup was literally 13 times more valuable than oil. And just like the drug trade, when a product is highly regulated and incredibly expensive, a black market explodes. Richard Valliere didn't see a warehouse full of condiments. He saw a bank vault with the door left open, but he couldn't do it alone. But you can't just walk out with a barrel under your arm. These things weigh 600 pounds. He needed an insider. He found one in a man named Avik Karen, whose wife just happened to own the warehouse that the Federation was renting. Talk about a conflict of interest. Karen had the keys, Valliere's had the buyers, and together they had a plan that was audaciously simple. The ghost ship method. Most heists fail because they are too complicated. You know, hacking the mainframe, dodging lasers, rappelling down an elevator shaft. Valliere didn't bother with that. His plan was indistinguishable from a legitimate business operation. They didn't break in at night wearing ski masks. They drove semi-trucks right up to the loading dock in broad daylight. Here is the genius, and the stupidity of the plan. They didn't steal the barrels. If they stole the barrels, the inventory count would be off, and the Federation would notice immediately. Instead, they took the barrels to a separate location, a sugar shack nearby. They would unscrew the cap, siphon out the glorious, expensive syrup, and then...
Morning, Frank.
Here is the kicker.
Morning,
They
Bob.
filled the barrels back up with water. Actually, it wasn't even just water. They used water from a nearby creek. They pumped the water in, sealed the barrels, and drove them right back to the strategic reserve. They put the barrels back exactly where they found them. To the naked eye, nothing had changed. The white metal drums were still there. They still weighed roughly the same, but inside? The value had dropped from $1,100 to zero. It was the perfect financial illusion. On paper, the Federation's assets were secure. In reality, they were guarding the world's most expensive collection of dirty creek water. For months, this went on. Truck in, syrup out, water in, truck back. It became a factory line of theft. Richard Vallières wasn't just stealing a little bit for his pancakes. He was draining the reserve dry. He started selling this black market syrup to unsuspecting distributors in New Brunswick and Vermont. It was pure profit. No quotas, no taxes, no federation fees. But greed is a funny thing. It's sticky. And the more you touch it, the harder it is to let go. They got comfortable. They stopped refilling some barrels with water and just started leaving them empty because they got lazy. They thought they were untouchable. They thought, who is ever going to check the barrels in the back of the warehouse? Well, someone was about to check. And the house of cards, or rather the house of tin barrels, was about to come crashing down in the most embarrassing way possible. So, Richard Vallières and his crew are living the dream. They're effectively printing money. Or rather, they are draining money out of barrels and replacing it with creek water. They have moved millions of dollars worth of product right under the nose of the Federation. But remember the one rule of financial crime? Don't get lazy. And definitely don't ignore physics. In August 2012, the Federation sent an inspector to the St. Louis to Blandford warehouse for a routine annual inventory check. This is usually the most boring job in the world. You walk in, you count the barrels, you check the seals, you go home. But on this fateful Tuesday, the inspector decided to climb up a stack of barrels to check the inventory near the ceiling. Now, a full barrel of maple syrup weighs about 620 pounds. It is solid. It is immovable. It is a tank. But an empty barrel? That weighs almost nothing. As the inspector grabbed onto a barrel to hoist himself up, the barrel didn't stay put. It wobbled. It nearly tipped over. Panic, confusion. He tapped on the side of the metal drum. Instead of the dull, heavy thud of dense sugar, he heard a hollow metallic ping. It was the sound of an empty bank account. The inspector immediately ordered the barrels to be opened. The first one? Empty. The second one?
This is
Water.
not good.
The third one? More water. It was the Schrodinger's cat of breakfast. Until they opened the barrels, the syrup was both there and not there. But now, the box was open, and the cat was long gone. A national emergency. This triggered what I can only describe as a national state of emergency in Quebec. The Federation went into meltdown mode. They realized that their strategic reserve, the anchor of the global maple syrup economy, was essentially a warehouse full of dirty water and air. The police were called. But this wasn't a job for a regular beat cop. The Sûreté du Québec, the provincial police, launched a massive investigation. They called it, wait for it, Project Juliet. Okay, not Operation Waffle, which was a missed marketing opportunity, but still. The scale of the crime scene was a logistical nightmare. There were 16,000 barrels in that warehouse. The police had to test every single one. Imagine the forensics team. Usually they are dusting for fingerprints on guns or analyzing blood spatter. Here? They were literally weighing barrels and taste testing the contents. Does this taste like a premium amber grade, or does it taste like the St. Lawrence River? The final tally was devastating. Out of 16,000 barrels, nearly 1,600 had been compromised. 6 million pounds of syrup were gone. Vanished. That is roughly $18.7 million Canadian dollars stolen. To put that in perspective, that is a higher value than the famous Lufthansa heist in the movie Goodfellas. Now here's where the story shifts from a funny theft to a complex financial crime. You see, stealing the syrup is only half the battle. You have to sell it. Richard Vallières wasn't just a thief, he was a black market CEO. He had created a legitimate-looking supply chain to launder the syrup. He used an emergency authorization meant for buying syrup from other provinces to fake the paperwork. He sold the stolen goods to legitimate syrup distributors in New Brunswick, Quebec, and Vermont. These distributors didn't ask too many questions. Why? Because Vallières was selling it at a discount, but still high enough to look real. It was pure profit for everyone involved. The syrup you ate in 2012? If you bought it in the US, there's a statistical probability that you were eating stolen evidence. You were an accessory to the crime, enjoying your pancakes. The investigation revealed that this wasn't just a couple of guys with a truck. It was a network. There were drivers, warehouse workers, and illicit syrup fences. Yes, Chaudien's syrup fences are a real thing. By late 2012, the police had enough evidence. They started making arrests, they raided homes, seizing vehicles and cash. But the ringleader, Richard Vallières, wasn't going down without a fight.
3.
A legal fight. When the police closed in, the narrative started to shift. The media went wild. The New York Times, BBC, everyone covered it. Canada became the laughingstock of the financial world for about a week. But for the farmers, it wasn't funny.
What happened
their
that
retirement
night?
funds, their hard work,
I don't remember.
had been siphoned off and replaced with H2O. And the question remained, where was the money? $18 million doesn't just disappear. Vallières was eventually caught. But his defense? It was pure genius. He didn't deny doing it. He just claimed he didn't steal that much. He tried to gaslight the court into thinking the Federation was exaggerating the numbers to claim insurance money. He tried to turn the trial into a referendum on the Federation itself. He painted himself not as a thief, but as a Robin Hood figure fighting against the evil syrup cartel. Was he a hero of the free market, or just a sticky-fingered crook? The trial was set. The evidence was sticky. And the verdict would ruin someone's life forever. The trial. The syrup kingpin takes the stand. In 2016, the trial of the century began. Okay, maybe not the century, but certainly the stickiest trial in Canadian history. Richard Vallières, the mastermind, the Walter White of waffles, stood before a jury of his peers. The courtroom drama was incredible. On one side, you had the Crown prosecutors, painting Vallières as a sophisticated criminal boss
Headline
who
news from
orchestrated
around the
a complex
world.
logistics ring to defraud hardworking farmers. On the other side, Vallières tried a defense that I like to call the I was just the middleman maneuver. He claimed he lived in fear. He claimed he was pressured by other scarier syrup gangsters. Yes, apparently that is a demographic that exists. But the jury looked at the numbers. They looked at the wiretaps. They looked at the $10 million dollars that passed through Vallières' accounts. And they realized something simple. You don't accidentally siphon 3,000 tons of syrup. That takes dedication. That takes passion. The verdict came down guilty, convicted of theft, fraud, and trafficking stolen goods. But the prison sentence, 8 years, wasn't the headline. The headline was the fine. And this is where the story becomes a fascinating case study in proceeds of crime law. In most thefts, if you steal a car and crash it, you go to jail. But in financial crimes involving proceeds, the government doesn't just want you in a cell, they want their money back. The judge ordered Vallières to pay a fine of nearly $10 million Canadian dollars. Why $10 million? Because that was the estimated profit he made. The court said, "We aren't just punishing you, we are bankrupting you." They gave him 10 years to pay it. If he didn't pay it within 10 years, he would have to serve another 6 years in prison. Vallières panicked. He appealed. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. Imagine being a Supreme Court justice. You spend your life studying constitutional law, human rights, and complex treaties. And your Tuesday afternoon is spent debating the wholesale value of grade A dark amber syrup. In a landmark ruling in 2022, the Supreme Court lowered the fine slightly to about $9 million, but the message was clear. Crime doesn't pay. In fact, in this case, crime costs you $9 million plus legal fees. Vallières was ruined. The mastermind was left with nothing but a criminal record and a debt he could never settle. So, what did we learn from the great maple syrup heist? First, on a practical level, the Federation of Quebec maple syrup producers tightened their security. The strategic reserve is now guarded better than most nuclear silos. They have cameras, motion sensors, and presumably guards who are allowed to taste test the barrels at random. But the deeper lesson is about economics. This heist didn't happen because Richard Vallières was evil. It happened because of arbitrage. When you have a cartel, the Federation, that artificially restricts supply to keep prices high, you create a gap in the market. You make the product artificially valuable. And whenever there is a massive gap between the cost of production and the market price, a black market will emerge. It happens with diamonds. It happens with narcotics. And yes, it happens with pancake topping. The Federation created the conditions for the crime. Richard Vallières just exploited them. As long as there is a syrup cartel controlling the taps, there will always be someone trying to bypass the meter. Today, the maple syrup you buy at the store is safe. It's real. But the next time you pour that amber gold over your breakfast, take a moment to respect it. You aren't just eating sugar. You're eating a commodity that men have plotted for, lied for, and gone to prison for. You are eating the most controversial agricultural product on Earth. Richard Valliere stole 3,000 tons of it, but he lost his freedom. Was it worth it? Well, for a few sweet years, he was the king of Quebec. But as they say in the finance world, the market always corrects itself. And sometimes the correction is a prison cell. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this sticky tale of financial crime, smash that like button. It helps the algorithm more than a sugar rush. I'm Loonie Logic, and I'll see you in the next heist.